Hi, welcome to Counterpunch, the show that exposes the unfolding world communist revolution. Please like the show, share the show, and especially subscribe on epochtv. Today I'm going to talk about the communists' greatest weapon. And it's not something you think about, it's not nuclear weapons, it's not propaganda, it is the peace movement. That is the communists' main weapon for conquering this planet. Now, with tensions escalating in Eastern Europe as Russia threatens to invade the Ukraine, we're seeing the peace movement spring into action. And that's to be expected. It is a weapon of the Russians, it's a weapon of the broader Chinese communist movement, and it's there to basically weaken Western resolve in defending the Ukraine, to weaken NATO, and pave the way for a Russian invasion of the Ukraine and a Russian conquest of Europe and eventual world communist domination. Now, the communist use of peace as a weapon goes back to Lenin's time. You know, his famous promise to the Russian people, support the revolution, help us overthrow the Tsars, we will give you peace, land and bread, the big slogan. In other words, surrender to communism, help us on our mission, and we will give you peace. Well, what do they mean by peace? During the 1980s, a friend of mine, a New Zealander, trained in Moscow as a communist at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning. 3,500 students there. And it was explained to him by one of the professors at the time, Comrade Medvedev. He said something like this. He said to my friend John, he said, there are many clever people in the Soviet Union, but no one has ever come up with a weapon as powerful as the peace movement. Communists are always talking about peace and democracy. Now, peace to us means absence of war. To the communists, it is something different. The main driver of conflict in the world, the class struggle, will only end with the final victory of communism. Therefore, that's when we have peace. So therefore, peace is when communism takes control. So they're sincere when they say they believe in peace, but their definition of peace is complete communist control. And the same with democracy, their other favorite word. We believe it means constitutional government. We believe it means rule of law, majority rule, things like that. And just to be clear, I believe in a constitutional republic is even better than democracy. It's even better for the rights of the people. But most people understand democracy as a synonym for freedom to most people. To communist, democracy means rule by the people. But who are the representatives of the people? The communists are the representatives of the people. So therefore, democracy means communist rule. So following that logic, the peace movement as defined by communists is a movement designed to weaken anti-communism, to disarm anti-communism, to divide all forces opposed to communism. In 1950, the Soviets established their first international communist front. It was called the World Peace Council. Now, the World Peace Council was a big organization that had branches all over the world. Originally, the first campaigns they mounted were against American involvement in the Korean War, against Western involvement in the Korean War, because they wanted the Korean communists to win that war. Then they backed the International Stockholm Appeal. That was run by the World Peace Council, supported by communist parties all over the world, basically calling for US nuclear disarmament. And of course, if the US disarmed, the Soviets would have a monopoly on nuclear weapons and they could use it to defeat the West. Later, they started campaigns against the Vietnam War, against NATO in Europe, because again, the communists understood that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was the only thing stopping them from conquering the whole of Europe as a stepping stone to conquering the rest of the planet. In the 1980s, Reagan and Thatcher were pretty strong. They were both anti-communists. They understood peace through strength, and they resisted Russian backed peace movement attempts to destroy NATO. And I've talked about this before. So the Soviets actually turned to New Zealand, my home country, And they used the New Zealand Peace Council, which was run by communist leaders like Bill Anderson and Ken Douglas and Barney Richards, to get New Zealand to ban nuclear warships from its harbours. This destroyed the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance. The goal of that was not to prepare New Zealand for Soviet invasion. The goal of it was to encourage the European peace movement to break up NATO. Fortunately for us, it didn't work in the long run, but New Zealand is now very vulnerable to communist China as a result of no longer being in an alliance with the United States. Now, the World Peace Council was headquartered for many years in Helsinki, Finland, a so-called neutral country. And it was headed by Ramesh Chandra of the Indian Communist Party and a New Zealander called Ray Stewart. He was a communist accountant, and he handled the massive Soviet subsidies that kept the World Peace Council afloat. Now, the World Peace Council under Ramesh Chandra interacted with Western politicians. They were affiliated to the United Nations. They worked very closely with American leftists because they were trying to disarm the United States, the biggest opponent of world communism. And the World Peace Council worked closely with American politicians like Ron Dellums, who served on the Armed Services Committee, Charlie Rangel of New York, and even Senator Carl Levin of Michigan. So it was a major international Soviet operation. Now, since 1999, the World Peace Council has moved to Athens, Greece, and is now largely run by third world communists, European communists. The current heads are Brazilian communist Socorro Gomes and Greek communists Thanasis Paphilis and Iraklis Savvidiris. In modern times, the World Peace Council, since the so-called collapse of communism, which was really a retreat more than a collapse, they've resurged. It's now a big organization again. It's got about 100 affiliates around the world. And these groups are used by the Russians and the Chinese to disseminate their propaganda all through the world, to different peace groups around the world, to government officials, through the United Nations, through local media, whatever. So the World Peace Council serves as a transmission belt for communist messages that originate in Russia or China, but are spread all over the world in a major propaganda drive. Now, these groups, the World Peace Council affiliates, are still largely headed by communists all around the world. In Canada, the Canadian Peace Congress is headed by former head of the Canadian Communist Party, Miguel Figueroa. In Ireland, the Peace and Neutrality Alliance, the World Peace Council affiliate, is headed by Padraig Mannion of the communist-controlled Workers' Party. In Australia, the World Peace Council affiliate is the Campaign for International Cooperation and is led by Australian communist Roman Abedson and the Australian Communist Party head Andrew Irving. This group works closely with the Australian Anti-Bases Campaign Coalition, which has been headed for years by an Australian Communist Party couple, Dennis Doherty and Hannah Middleton. This group is now campaigning actively against Australia's decision to purchase 4 nuclear-powered submarines that they need to counter Communist China's encroachment in their area. In the United Kingdom, the Communist Party of Britain is the main pro-Russian, pro-Chinese Communist Party. There are many, but that's the main one these days. Now, one of its leaders, Liz Payne, heads the local World Peace Council affiliate, the British Peace Assembly. Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, the very famous British peace movement, has always been led by communists and communist fellow travellers. The current leader is former Communist Party of Britain member Kate Hudson, who still participates in communist campaigns to this day. And until his death, the leader of C&D Scotland was another Communist Party of Britain leader, Alan McKinnon. When the Russians invaded parts of the eastern Ukraine in 2014, the British Communist parties sprang into action, specifically the Communist Party of Britain and the new Communist Party of Britain, which is pro-Russia, pro-China and pro-North Korea. The propaganda message was this: Ukraine is run by fascist and corrupt politicians and businessmen. The Ukraine is full of Nazis. The Ukraine is not part of the West. The Ukraine is a horrible, undemocratic country. All complete lies. The Ukraine is pro-Western, it wants to be part of the West and deserves our support, but not if you listen to the communists. So in tune with this propaganda theme, the Communist Party of Britain and the new Communist Party of Britain established a group called Solidarity with Anti-Fascist Resistance in Ukraine, meaning the provinces of the Ukraine that were taken over by the Russians were anti-fascist, and they were fighting, they were breaking away from the Ukrainian fascists. So therefore they deserved, and with the help of Russia, therefore they deserved the support of Western communists, and no Western country should come to the aid of the Ukraine. Now this coalition was led by Alex Gordon, a railways trade unionist and a very powerful leader of the Communist Party of Britain. Andrew Murray of Stop the War Coalition also played a leading part in this organisation, and at the time he was a 40-year veteran of the Communist Party of Britain. He was also married for a time to Susan Mickey, was part of the SAGE group that has been promoting big lockdowns in Britain and using the British communist-controlled unions to enforce those lockdowns, all to the benefit of Communist China, I'm sure. In the United States, the US Peace Council, a local affiliate of the World Peace Council, was founded in 1979 by the Communist Party USA. Early supporters included Bernie Sanders, far-left Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who tried to set up a US Department of Peace in the US Congress, and Illinois State Senator Alice Palmer, who was the far leftist who gave a young Barack Obama his first job in the Democratic Party. A key figure in the US Peace Council today is veteran Connecticut communist Al Marder. Marder has held key positions in both the US and World Peace Councils. Here he is pictured in Moscow in 2015 at a Communist Party event. And here he is being embraced by the leader of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov. Today, the World Peace Council works very closely with the Russian-controlled International Federation for Peace and Conciliation and the Chinese People's Association for Peace and Disarmament. Now, the Russian and the Chinese communists are using the World Peace Council to spread their propaganda around the world. And this propaganda is setting everything up for a Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Again, as happened in 2014, 2015, the Ukrainians are being painted as fascists, undemocratic, ruled by corrupt oligarchs. They're not worthy of Western support. Why should Westerners stand up for the horrible, corrupt Ukraine? The Ukraine isn't even asking for foreign troops. All it's asking for is Western support and weapons and solidarity against the Russians. That's all it's asking for. And by the way, the Ukrainians used to have 200 nuclear weapons, which I'm sure they wish they had today. But they were given up. They were given to the Russians because Bill Clinton and other Western leaders promised the Ukrainians that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, the West, especially the United States, would stand solidly with the Ukraine against any Russian aggression. And now that it's happening, you have a whole legion of pro-Russian propagandists on both left and right, I must say, calling on America to stand down from the Ukraine, calling for Europe to stand down and allow 40 million Ukrainians to come under communist control. The Ukrainians are some of the toughest fighters in the world. Wouldn't it be better to have them on our side instead of being absorbed into the Russian army to fight to subjugate us? Wouldn't that make more sense? And we must be very clear. The Russians and the Chinese are working closely together. They have done for a long time. They're allied in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political, military, economic alliance, and have been since 2001. They held the world's largest military exercise together outside St. Petersburg a couple of years ago. So this idiot talk we hear from some people about helping the Ukraine would drive Russia towards China is absolutely fallacious. Russia and China are already joined at the hip. If we succumb to this, if we abandon the Ukraine as this World Peace Council and Russian propaganda advises us to do, 40 million Ukrainians will be set up for mass slaughter, subjugation, and reincorporation into the Soviet Empire. Is that really where we want to go, folks? So, as Reagan said, the only lasting peace comes through strength and unity. Only if the world stands with the Ukraine and puts massive sanctions on Russia and supports the Ukraine in a unified fashion will the Russian communists back off. And I call them communists, folks, because they are. Only if we stand strong will they back off. If we don't stand strong, if we back away from Western obligations to the Ukraine, we're setting those people up for a mass slaughter, and we have only ourselves to blame for what comes next. If we lose the Ukraine, we will lose Europe. If we lose Europe, we lose the world. That is guaranteed. So I hope you found this interesting, people. I hope this gives you a bit more perspective on the massive amounts of Russian and Chinese propaganda that's being pumped into our TV sets and newspapers every single day. I hope it makes you understand what's at stake here and how we need to stand with the West. We need to stand together. We need to back the Ukraine in their moment of need. So thanks very much for watching. Please, as I said, please like the show, share the show, pass this around as much as possible. We're at a crisis point here, a very critical point in world history, and we must stand together against communism, or we shall all be communists in the not too distant future. So thanks again for watching. I'll sign out now. Remember, only truth can save us now. So God bless you all. God bless America. God bless the Ukraine and every freedom-loving person on this planet. Thank you so much.